This is the call to order for the Complete Streets Safety Committee. Today is May 7th. It is 6:30 p.m. and the committee is now in session. And with that, we can go ahead and skip. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt the agenda.
We should note, though, that Linda Detmer and
Oh.
Raymond Liu are not here.
Yes,
Everybody
Linda
else is
Demmer and
present.
Raymond Liu are not present. Yeah. All right, moving forward then, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt the agenda.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the agenda is adopted. Were there any public comment?
No emails and no one in the Zoom meeting right now.
And you did forward the previous email, but that's sort of already on the record, then we don't need to discuss that any further.
Yeah, I think we could do it as a separate item or maybe during visitation. Yeah.
All right, wonderful. All right, moving on then, can I get, I guess, the minutes from April 2nd went out. Is there a motion to approve those minutes or any comment on those minutes?
Motion to approve if there's no comments.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There's no old business on the agenda for today, so we'll go ahead and move on to new business. And the first item of new business is the discussion of Visitation Avenue survey results and the outline of next steps. So I guess I'll hand it over to staff.
So I think we had a pretty successful survey, giving people the 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever it was, to give us comments. We got 130 people completing the survey. There weren't a lot of them that were businesses or people that live on Visitation, but there's still a lot of feedback about. A lot of people had observations, so we just have the information here for you and want to start a discussion about what your guys' thoughts are about that, and then a couple of pronged approach about we see it as two pieces, kind of the trucks and cars that are double parking, and then the other issues of safety, speeding, crossing at intersections, and all of that.
Can you go ahead and maybe go through the survey for us? Then I guess the top two sort of issues you mentioned were double parking and then sort of, okay, yeah. I guess are the other key takeaways you want to mention or anything else to highlight before discussion?
So again, what we had heard before we did the survey, to me, was fairly well reflected in this feedback that we got. Double parking being the biggest issue, delivery vehicles, rideshare drivers, and restaurant patrons, people that are picking up dinner, and the Uber Eats and DoorDash wasn't specifically called out necessarily, but that we call the restaurant patrons. There were some comments about daytime, lunchtime, and some about dinner time, early evenings, mostly on weekdays. I don't recall, we could go look at the individual data, but if there were weekends too, people also, probably there is an issue at lunchtime on weekends, but dinner time could still be a concern. And then there were a lot of people that commented about speeding, failure to stop at stop signs, all times of the day and week. Some pedestrians don't feel safe making those crossings of Visitation. Illegal U-turns was also brought up at the council meeting and reiterated here. Cross double yellow lines to get to a parking space as quickly as possible. It is legal to U-turn at an intersection, but not across a double yellow line, unless it's illegal to turn across one if you're going into a driveway, but not to U-turn for a parking space. Again, the parking is maybe the third prong of the issue, is that people are still saying there's not enough parking, lack of spaces, vehicles are parked for a longer term than they're supposed to be. And obviously some spots were removed for the daylighting, the AB 413. And people are suggesting adding parking or enforcing the time limits. So visibility obstructed by parked cars should be somewhat reduced or improved due to AB 413 and the daylighting law, but people still did note that. Visitation Monterey and Visitation in San Bruno are frequently mentioned as problematic, and you guys should know that we made some improvements at Visitation in San Bruno that are supposed to make pedestrians more visible crossing San Bruno, but to Visitation Avenue traffic.
I guess could you comment on what those were?
Well, so we put in did we ask for money to make that bulb out more permanent? Okay, so we now have delineators to kind of bulb out I'm not gonna get the north-south correct, but the far side of San Bruno from Visitation, so a pedestrian or a vehicle is more visible to someone on Visitation going out of town. Typically, you would see them coming into town, but when you're going out of town with that 5-way intersection, those vehicles and pedestrians were somewhat hidden from view. And we did ask for funding to make that permanent with concrete, but that's in the budget that the council's going to review with everything else they're looking at next month. There were requests to add stop signs, stricter enforcement of parking rules and traffic violations. So go back up a little bit. Some respondents did not have any issues and were satisfied with conditions. It's worth noting. And on deliveries, we didn't get specific, so if we're going to look at helping with pickup, drop-off deliveries, we're probably going to have to do a second wave of outreach, because we did offer the businesses to be able to call, to have someone come visit. We also had our economic development vitality director make some contact to businesses, dropped off letters, but we didn't get a lot of specific feedback. I do want to add that there was some communication with, let me open the email, Midtown Market, and I guess it kind of corresponded with some, let me see if I get this right, not enforcement, but discussion with the trucks that deliver and park over the yellow line. So Midtown thought that those occur Tuesdays generally, and that typically that delivery driver has 2 people, one that makes sure that traffic works while the other one unloads what they're delivering. But the interaction they had with police, probably because of a complaint, I'm guessing, it was on a Monday, and there was one guy by himself, and maybe he'd made the delivery and he was still in his truck, on his phone, in the middle of the road. So another problem at Midtown was that they had stored some food truck vehicles in there, so there wasn't really space for that truck to use the parking lot to do deliveries. And I understand those food trucks that were inactive are now gone, so there's more space in that parking lot potentially. I'm seeing some deliveries 11 to 4. Takeout and food delivery pickups more common during dinner, still at lunch. Some happen. Takeout is popular, as you guys may know, at Lucky House, Julie's, Melissa's, and Nana's. And so do you have other comments? Pedestrian safety, speeding vehicles, asking for traffic calming, better enforcement, and parking still being a problem. Some people are not happy with the crossing flags. Some people are very happy with and particularly requested those. I'm interested in the committee's feedback if they've seen how those have been working.
Any comment on that, I guess, with the flags? Anyone? Yeah.
Scroll down a little bit more.
So, not necessarily with the flags. I don't know if we could make other comments in general.
So key themes were pedestrian safety, parking challenges, and the need for thoughtful, context-sensitive solutions. Sorry, I was finishing what I was how I was summarizing the results. And then we did attach all of the individual responses.
Great, thank you. Especially the individual responses will be helpful to comb through later. Yeah, thank you for the summary with that. We'll open it up for comment.
Yeah, I mean, actually, very surprised that maybe I don't perceive it, but I don't see the business community feedback here. And one clarification I would like to have when you say I live in Visitacion or work in Visitacion, are those business owner or just people that are working over there?
Could be anyone that works there.
Because when I send you that email with Sue Crocker, comments about the double parking, I had a few comments from other business owners, and one of the things that they're saying is that there's lack of parking over there, and they're also thinking some people park, the same problem that we're having with the residential parking. That there's people parking there, sometimes they leave their vehicle there, or sometimes they park for longer hours, and it's just affecting, their business. So they were thinking, like other places that they have those meters that are based on times that might help regulate those people that they park there longer. But provided this is a mixed use, you have businesses and residential, it's probably a tough one to deal with that.
Well, and correct, and anywhere you have a meter, you need enforcement to be able to still manage that. There were a couple of comments that even when there's a parking space, people will double park to pick up food, even when one's available.
I will say that I did, I know I was telling Darius, we had discussed that we were going to do personal outreach to the businesses, so I did talk to a couple of them, ones that I frequent, just in casual conversation, and it was no handicap accessible parking designated, and not enough parking because there's long-term parking, individuals, residents who just park and don't leave, don't move their cars. And if I recall correctly, Randy, I think, mentioned a few months ago there was a company who can do the parking meters. They keep the profits and whatnot. I mean, if having our police department, watch the meters and do all that is too cumbersome for us now, perhaps that's a great alternative. One, it'll keep the flow of the cars and, less responsibility and workload on us for the time being. But it is something that talking to those business owners that I did talk to, they were curious about that, if that could be a possibility. And then also wondering, and I have no idea on roadway width and whatnot, but can you re-stripe the roads to fit more cars? Can you do 90-degree parking instead of parallel parking? I don't know, if there's any width ability, but just some thoughts.
Sadly, no, I don't think that there is the width availability to do that. But I do think that the speed sticks that we're talking about, or parking sticks, I'm sorry, stop sticks, thank you. That's why the commander's here to correct me on these things. But the stop sticks are a good opportunity for you, perhaps as a suite of solutions, as you come up with other ideas to do that, because they can certainly be modified for different times of day, for different time periods, all of the above. If you wanted to perhaps recommend that there are some places for the transportation network companies, the Uber lifts and such, to park in some of that very dense area where the restaurants are, we could set that up for 5-10 minute parking during X hours. The rest of the parking that's already zoned as 2 hours, we could say, well, that's 2 hour parking from 8 a.m. to maybe, I don't know, I'm just throwing numbers out here. I'm not throwing suggestions, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And they're capable of doing that, and that might help the turnover.
So one other comment was, during lunchtime, they have a problem with parking, and they feel that they're losing business because some people, they just decide to go somewhere else because they couldn't find parking. And also when there are events on the park, some days, it's almost like a trend in their business that sales drop because there's too much going on and people are not going in there. So just to be sensitive for that, I just wanted to raise that up, what, their feedback.
Yeah, one of the comments that I noticed was probably a good need for the senior center, especially, was the handicap parking. There's limited handicap parking on Visitation. So near the senior center especially, or maybe the community center as well, there could be some spots.
I think the only challenge with the handicap spots is that near the sunrise room, you probably have some spaces that are level enough that you could put in a legal ADA, but on the rest of the Visitation, you don't because of the slope. And if you look at the one handicap spot we did put in when we built the new library, you can see what it took to build that in. We had to build a space up, build it flat and level, and we ended up taking out 3 other parking spaces. So there's a tension there. There's a push and pull to get it done, but I certainly agree with the comment that it would be reasonable to do down by the sunrise room.
Randy, could you maybe comment on some of the other suite of solutions or creative solutions that are at our fingertips, kind of like the stop sticks or something else that's maybe not permanent and sort of, to test the waters, especially to address some of the stop issues or speeding, U-turn, that kind of stuff?
Sure, I can opine on some things. It strikes me as I'm looking at this, if we put aside just for a moment the concern about speeding and stop signs, that a lot of this boils down to parking, and parking in the sense that there either isn't some, whether that be for the retail customers, the transportation network companies, or the delivery trucks. And that boils over into other problems. It boils over into people double parking. It boils into people driving away because they feel like there's not something there. So I think some opportunities to do that. We had 2 loading zone stations that were established at one point in time. But there's one on adjacent the cross street of Mariposa for the Brisbane Inn, and on the other side of Visitation, also on Mariposa. But when that new home built out, that hydrant park was actually under license to the city, and it was owned by that property owner. And when a new owner came in, they rightfully said, hey, we have the right to terminate that license, so remove your hydrants, we're gonna build our homes out. I think that there would be some opportunity, although it's always challenging in this town, right? To try and create some loading zone specific spots for the trucks, to try and create some TNC, I'll just call them Uber Lyft, maybe so I don't have to keep using that acronym, spots, to use the parking sticks in spaces to enforce that. And I think and these are all things that you would have to consider, and that would have to be your recommendations to the council, of course, right? I'm just throwing them out here right now. And I think we might also want to consider in that business quarter on Visitation, suggesting that we increase the fines for double parking, so that when the police do catch someone, it is a ticket that truly discourages you from doing that. And the example I use goes back more than a quarter of a century. Back in the day when Candlestick Park was still in play and still in use, some of you may know that off of Beatty, there used to be a parking lot that they would create there, right? But flow over traffic would come all the way down Beatty and would park on Tunnel. And so this is going back into the late 90s. And at that point in time, the city raised the parking fee for that location to $100. That cut down on a lot of that. So I would say that whole suite of things. One other thing that I know the city manager has talked about many times is the now abandoned teen center site, which is on San Bruno Avenue, just behind the hardware store. It's a flat piece of ground. And it would take some money, but maybe there's an opportunity to turn that into a parking space and have a time duration. It certainly would be your call to decide if we ought to charge people to park there or not. But if we're going to put these parking sticks in this corridor and use them and try and restrict and turn that parking over, if the city can find the money to do that, maybe that's a good place. So that's what's been going through my head, Chair.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was a way to talk to the landowner of that vacant lot that they're building on at Mariposa and Visitation. If we could use some of theirs for public parking, but if the teen center, abandoned lot is possible to consider that would be, I think, it's close. I mean, trying to find proximity so people aren't complaining like, oh, I have to walk a half a mile to get to Julie's or whatever.
Right, and we own the teen center site, so that's the beauty of it. The council can do whatever they choose with it. I'm not exactly sure what the plans are at the site across from the VI. I know there's actually 2 or 3 parcels there. I think there are 2 that run perpendicular in Mariposa and one's parallel. And the 2 that are perpendicular, I believe, are under development right now. It looks like he's putting a new home in there. So I don't know how much space there would be left on the other one. But we have this really incredible challenge with parking. Right? You want to be able to park. You don't want people to park there forever. We want people to use the spaces. So I think we need to find a way to balance that. But there's some thoughts for you to chew on. See what the committee thinks about them.
Yeah, thank you for those.
Yeah, I like the increase of the double parking fine. I think we should seriously consider that as a deterrent. I know that when I was at the last meeting with Councilmember Mackin and Kearns, they talked about a different way of finding a way to, encourage people to behave better with their driving. That wasn't just monetary. I'm not sure how that discussion continued or if it didn't I don't know if Commander Garcia, if you were going to take that up or who was going to take that up, but talking to find out if there was a way to make them stand on the corner and hold a sign.
Yeah, I think you're
saying-
referring to the public shaming.
I didn't want to call it that, but go for it. Thank you.
I don't know how else to call it. I don't think we can do stocks anymore. I think that was more an idea of, putting people's name in a local paper. I don't know if you've got klutz issues or with that.
Yeah, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to share that information because of privacy issues, so.
Trying
Yeah.
to find different ways.
I think that probably would create other type of problems. But staying on this, if you probably look at that's something typical that you see in different towns, and this is Brisbane downtown, and we need to accommodate it as such. It's definitely a small and unique town, but for the most, downtowns that you go, you're going to have a parking structure around it to accommodate, parking. And if you look at or think about the ratio now, there's probably about three structures that are coming up, and that's going to increase the residential. And usually those are going to bring even more cars. And so we just need to think about that. And that spot also could be used for parking when they do events in the park, which that generates a lot of vehicles that need parking too.
I guess I'd be curious to hear from the committee as well if the flags, because the flags were brought up as well, how those have been received or used at all, because that was sort of a creative solution I thought was interesting. Any comment on that?
I haven't personally used them. I did notice the ones on San Bruno today. That's great. It's good to see those there as well. I'm hoping that will help people actually be more visible when crossing San Bruno and Visitacion, but I haven't seen them actually be used. I've seen people crossing the street, but didn't even grab the flag.
Thanks. Yeah, I've seen this. Pretty interesting. I kind of like them. I guess I'm curious, has anyone ever proposed closing down portions of visitations to cars before? Is that something that the town would consider? Is that too sort of out there and not quite, making like a not all the way drive-through space, but a space where...
I think I'm going to leave the meeting now, sir, just so I'm not associated with that. No, I'm making a joke here. To my knowledge, I mean, Karen, you've been here a few years longer than me, but I don't think we've ever heard anyone say that.
Not suggesting that at all. I was just curious because a lot of towns are sort of thinking about some of that to close off and sort of make different roads, but I don't know that Brisbane is equipped to sort of handle the traffic.
Well, you just have the impact on the side streets.
Yeah.
Because you have, I think we can call Visitacion a business corridor. It's primarily a business corridor. It's retail business. And all of the cross streets are residential. So then you end up with issues that you've seen and you've heard about it. Certainly, we've all heard about the traffic issues. Berkeley seems to be one of the cities that over the years has really tried a lot of these things, and then they end up pushing things into residential streets. And then the residents are rightly concerned because, their kids really are more likely to be out there. It's the push and pull. And I think the biggest challenge we have, and staff, we were talking about this earlier, is one of the things that you see and that you see really clearly in the survey is that everybody has different experiences. They all come from different backgrounds. And I think I've said it here before, you can't deny someone else's experience. You can't deny that when they say, I feel afraid, that they don't feel afraid. They're saying that because they are, right? But then we try and balance that with the best practices in engineering, we try and balance that with, you know, I always use the bell curve as an example of a distribution. If we've got, you know, 10% of the population feeling that way, maybe we don't need to do something that necessarily impacts the other 90%. So that's where we go back and forth at. And that's okay. And it's part of our public process, but it creates the challenges that you get to deal with, because there's not, sadly, within traffic engineering, it's not just a simple solution. It's not saying, well, Randy, how much does a gallon of water weigh? And I can tell you that, I can give you that answer. It isn't formulaic. I can't just punch a number in and say, this is the answer, and everybody agrees to it. So I appreciate all your effort on that, because I know it's not easy.
I know we have a lot of comments in this survey to read through as well, and the assignment was 90 days, I believe, from when it was given to us. Is that correct? And do we still have time to do additional outreach to the community, and perhaps, or where do we sort of stand in the timeline for this and what we need to deliver?
Yeah, we're at the 30 days right now.
Can I just make a quick comment? And I don't want to go out of tangent, but when you talked about closing, you know, part of the Visitacion, I was reminded, I think I mentioned in the past, when we do those street events, and it's good that Commander Garcia is here, how are we blocking those streets, you know, to make sure there's no any access to, you know, somebody going with their vehicle and just ramming people, as we have seen in other cities?
So I'll take a shot at that, because I think you're talking about, like, for instance, the Christmas caroling, when we do the Christmas tree. Yeah, that ends up being a public works function. So we set up a traffic control up at the top, just beyond Madhouse. And then as we roll down the streets, we continue to block them. It's almost like the ushers letting you out of your pew in church, where we come down slowly and we block a street. And then once the carolers have blocked past it, we've leapfrogged onto the next street. So it's piece by piece. They're escorted, yes.
Did we only have 30 days, Karen? Is that what you're saying? Like, we're at the 30 days, we only had 30 days?
No, we have 90.
We do have
and
90,
We've only
okay.
spent 30. You might want to ask if you're a member of the public is.
Yeah, I was going to ask public comment on this issue. Oh, yeah, please.
Sorry, it's my first time with these meetings. I am from Midtown Market. And like you guys said, they can park inside the parking lot right next to the store where we have a leased parking. But the only issue is we have like 53 feeters long big trucks. Those truck doesn't fit in the parking. If they drive in, they cannot back out. It's too hard them to back out. I used to be a long haul driver, so I know it's too hard. But for the small trucks, whichever they're coming in, we will make them to park inside the parking lot. So whatever the safety measures we can do it, we can help us out. And we will make sure if the big trucks are coming and one of my employees, they will be standing outside with a flag or a stop sign or whatever we can do it, we will help that out.
Great, thank you.
You mentioned that the parking lot, you're leasing that. Is that something that can be used for more public use, or is it strictly for Midtown
No,
customers?
everybody's using that parking.
Okay.
But we just try to there was a Nana's Kitchen before, and they used to park and have a lunch or dinner over there. At that time, we just have, like, because our customers, they mind there is nobody inside the store, but your parking lot is full. So at that certain time, we just let the customers or any other people to have park on the street. That's all. Besides that, everybody's using their parking lot. There is no restriction to not park in that parking. Anybody can park there. But for a certain time, it's not like sometimes we get issues with that. There was I think residential neighborhoods, they parked there for a couple of days. So that was the only problem we got it. But so far, anybody can park there. There is no restriction for anyone to has not parking or anything like that. Thank you.
And then other than trucks, is there any other pain points that you have or that you feel from, on the street there?
No, for like how you guys was talking about, that's the pedestrian walking for the stop signs. I think if there is a flashing lights, that gives your driver more attention rather than the flags.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Times and days of your deliveries, though, I think we're interested to confirm that. The times and days that the 53-foot trucks deliver.
There is only 1 or 2 days, and they just come for like 15 or 20 minutes. We make sure that they are not wasting the time. I'm not sure which day or time it is.
They surprise you.
Yeah, because those are. We knew that if the truck breakdowns, traffic, or sometimes they're late from the delivery where they are doing it, what's happening. So we know the specific dates, but not the time.
But I think what you were saying is that you and your team are going to help mitigate that by having one of your employees out there, which is
My guy, he will
appreciated.
stand outside with the stop sign, so we can help more traffic to be controlled.
Well, sir, why don't you, Chair, do you mind if we ask him a direct, could you go back to the mic, please, just so we can, because I'm going to ask you a direct question if you don't mind. So one of the things we were thinking about is because we haven't had room, Tomas, could you put that arrow down so it's blocking that driveway that we talked about? So we were wondering about creating a space. Whoa, what are you doing, bud? No, just the arrow, man. Stop the arrow. Follow instructions. So put the arrow over where that driveway is, enters Midtown Market. The other one, the little one. So we were thinking about putting a loading zone there that would block that driveway, would go to the curb, and we might have to adjust it to see if it would get a 53-footer in there. But how would you feel about creating a space there for your 53-footers?
But it's not. You cannot turn the 53-footer from that small part.
They can't get out of there?
No, they can't, and there is always a cars. Like
But so
because,
where does he park now?
They back it. There is always they have a help with them. They go on to the left from here and back it up. Then they park double parking on Visitation.
But couldn't they do the same thing? I mean, if they were parked.
Yeah, if they go in the parking lot.
No,
that
not in the
small
parking lot, on the street. Here, let me move the arrow. Let me drive, Tomas. Sorry, we're making it impossible. We're making it impossible here for you.
You have a pointer?
What if we created a space here for 53 feet?
Yeah, then they can pull there and back it up over there. Yes.
And then he could pull out and then back out. So that's what
Yeah, then they can turn easily. Then they don't have to park over there.
and then like this driveway here.
We can block it for like 15, 20 minutes. That's not an issue, but
Okay.
there is always cars, that motorcycles are sitting there from, I don't know, from how long.
Well, see, if we created a loading zone though, what it would be,
That will very
if
helpful,
we made it a
yes.
loading zone and painted it yellow, then
That's
and
helpful,
we'd have to
yes.
enforce it, yeah.
Definitely.
So that could work.
That
Okay.
will be very helpful because they will go on to the right and make a back all the way over there and they can load and unload over there.
Yeah. Well, they would have to load and unload from here, from a stationary position.
Yes.
But
Then they can
could be
block,
parked
they
there.
can block that small
Yes.
driveway from
Yep.
there for like 20, 30 minutes. so
Exactly.
not
Your
a big
customers that
problem.
still need to park can come in here.
Yes, they
Yep.
have a big driveway to
Okay.
go from there.
All right, good. Thank you. I'm glad you're here because we were noodling that idea around. We didn't know if that would be helpful.
One more-
Randy, are you also talking about closing off that entrance to the parking
No,
lot? No,
no,
just
I-
temporarily
no, I-
with the
Temporary
loading.
when-
So let me,
When there is a loading unloading.
this mouse is designed for a young person, not for an
No,
old person.
I know
So
where
I'm
you're
very-
talking about with the one
So like
with the
from
two
here
arrows.
to here,
Yes,
that would be about the 53-foot. So that entire area would be marked as a loading zone.
yellow zone, okay.
And so certain hours of the day, loading and unloading only. And then I wouldn't close his driveway, but the thing with a driveway is that you can block your own driveway.
Mhm.
Just somebody else can. So that way, when the 53-footers come into town, Mario's agreeing with me, yeah? You can block your own driveway.
Oh, you can.
You can block your own driveway. You can park
your
in front of
own.
your, yes, your own, yes.
I thought you could.
Keep up, I'm not talking, well, you guys keep
But
up.
then there will be, there
So
will
yeah,
be
so he can
issues-
block his driveway.
Issues for
I'm
the residential who are parking there if we put the yellow lane.
No, not for them in the evening when they're home,
No, but
during the day, yes.
usually there is always a cars parked there in the daytime.
Whenever we do something to restrict parking, yes, it will affect somebody. I agree with you 100%. The question, and I think it's one of the things that the committee might want to give directions to staff on when we're done this
That,
conversation.
that will be very helpful.
is
If
that the
we
greater
do
good?
The yellow zone over there, that's gonna be, nobody will park on the Visitation then. None of the truck driver, they will park over there.
Well, because, and what I'm thinking is then, what we're trying to avoid with this, with the thought of loading
Yes.
zones, is if we put loading zones on a side street,
If
where we
it's
have the
there,
minimal
that-
impact, we
that's-
don't have
that's gonna be
trucks
helpful,
double
yes.
parked.
And these are mostly for the morning deliveries then? There aren't deliveries in the evening, or is it sort of
No, no, usually everything is in the morning.
in the morning?
So we could make
Yeah.
the hours restrictive. And we, you know, and if the committee gives us directions to say, we want you to examine this, we would have to go out, we would go out to each of the businesses, say, okay, look, we're looking at putting a loading zone here, maybe here too. What hours can we restrict that to the minimum amount of time? So we don't want to have a huge impact on the neighborhood, but we just want to get, let's face it, we all want food, right? You all want to go to Midtown, and he's got quite a liquor selection if you haven't been in there. And I appreciate the cold beer after long committee meetings. I really very much do. You want that. It's got to be delivered. It comes by a truck. The truck is not dropped in on a magic carpet like Aladdin. So we have to get it there somehow. How do we do that? And we got to find a place for it.
Thank you, yeah.
I'm gonna
that's a
get
great
out of here.
discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate you coming.
So Randy,
Sure.
that idea about the loading zone, that's a
Yes.
good idea there.
Uh-huh.
Does that mean the truck would have to come up like San Bruno Avenue and then turn down on
Yes.
Mendocino there?
Yes, and make that turn. Yes, correct.
Yeah. And then would that yellow zone be set back 20 feet from the corner? So, you know, it's like that, the guy that does the carpets that parks in front of the Beauty Fix at Monterey and Visitation, he blocks the stop sign with his truck
Yeah.
and also blocks the crosswalk, and people abruptly are stepping out in front of his truck in the crosswalk already out in the street.
I would really think about how we would have to deal with the requirements of AB 413 and at the same time trying to have the minimum amount of curb space.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
but it's a really fair question. Thank you for bringing it up.
If there are no other comments from the committee, I think we have to reread the comments here that from the public. I guess, is there a desire to do additional outreach before the next meeting from the committee, or do we feel like we have enough public sort of outreach and comments to review until the next meeting?
I feel like if we could talk to more of the business owners, that would be good to have, I think, just to get their input. You know, you want them to buy in on what we're doing.
Well, are we at the point that you have a proposal to talk to them about?
No, Darius is just asking about outreach, like talk to them about, you know, what they see, what they want, you know.
I guess the question is there additional outreach before the next meeting where we maybe, because obviously we need to read some of these comments, kind of marinate on it, come back with some proposals to discuss at the next meeting, but is there additional outreach between then, other than sort of informal outreach that we want to engage with? I guess, can you comment to the extent, because you mentioned that someone had reached out to businesses, was that sort of a reach out to all businesses or sort of some businesses as well?
I thought that our communications manager, the assistant to the city manager, and the economic development director went up and down the street and interacted with as many of the businesses as they could. So I think the information we have is the information we have. I'm a little confused too, like committee member Cabrera, who's not seeing that there's a lot of numbers of businesses contacted on there. So I don't know how they captured them, but this was a combination of in-person contacts and survey contacts, I believe.
Great, thanks for clarifying that. I think maybe then there might be some more informal outreach we should do as sort of individuals to talk some more, but it seems like this does have that comprehensively. But I think we should probably read through these comments more and at the next meeting probably discuss sort of some of these ideas and propose some of them.
So in general, does that mean we cannot talk to the business owner, or can we also talk to the business owners?
I'm sorry, do you mean as a committee member?
Yeah.
Oh, no, absolutely. Please feel free as a committee member to go back and talk to any of the people you know there. I don't know the people at the Lucky House, but, you know, I know Raphael, and I've just met the gentleman from Midtown. So, yeah, I think it's great. I think it's really helpful for you.
Yeah.
To see,
Right.
and one of the other things, if you'd like, we've heard you say a lot of things tonight. If you would like the committee to maybe draw out some of these ideas to kind of give you a map and say, okay, well, maybe we'd put a loading zone here, and I could take some of the comments that I heard tonight, both from the owner and from Paul, and trying to piece those together. And where we would put things, and if we have ideas about maybe where we would put limited parking spots, and just give you ideas, something to throw darts at, so the next time we talk about it, you can say, yeah, those things we really like, these things we don't.
Yeah, I think it'd be super helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm sorry, is your name Paul?
I'm sorry, I was talking to committee member Busco.
Oh. What's your name? I'm sorry. So, I'm sorry, I'm not good with pronunciation, but I think this is a great interaction, and what I'm thinking is, and this is a proposal for the committee, if we sort of handle this the way we handle Mariposa and Monterey, that we engage the community and we kept them posted on the different developments that we were finding out, and then we sort of give them a closure where we end up before bringing it to the council.
What was the suggestion, or what was the question?
Basically, if we could sort of handle this the way we handle Mariposa and Monterey, that we engage the community, and we kept them updated on the different discoveries that we were doing, and then we sort of had them, providing them with a closure.
Yeah, I think that's part of what we're doing here, especially with the survey going out to everyone. And then between now and the next meeting, I think we should do additional outreach on our own and then come back and discuss further. And it'd be great if we could get those sort of outline suggestions that, from this discussion for next meeting then. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So with that,
Sorry. Can we be a little more specific with Randy and Karen and Tomas on what we want them to do? Just loading? Do we want to have them look at, options for loading, or just loading on Mendocino? Or can you, propose any others that you might find, even if it's just a shorter space for, the Uber, DoorDash, whatever the other delivery drivers are?
I love being put on the spot, as it's frequently called. It's the Stump the City Engineer game. It's a game the whole family can play. So yes, I'll happy to throw some ideas out there at you. So we have the existing spot on Mariposa near the Brisbane Inn. I want staff, and I will have my staff take a look at expanding that, lengthening it. But one of the concerns we also want to be very, very sensitive to is that if a truck comes up Visitation and makes a right-hand turn onto Mariposa, its exit route is down Inyo.
Okay.
So we have to very carefully look at truck turning templates and see what that does, and I think we need to consider that neighborhood when that happens. The other potential parking space that we've already talked about, that the loading space at Mendocino. Tomas, can you drive us up by Lucky House on there? Thank you. So yeah, so it's on your left. You've got Melissa's, then you've got Lucky House. We've tossed around the idea of maybe 2 spaces right there adjoining Lucky House and Melissa's. That would be for the TNC drivers. Yeah, like right about in that space there, maybe by the driveway. And then if you want to rotate to the right, please, then I think that gets us then down that block a little bit where the boba shop is. The last 2 diagonal pull-in spaces, we see those as maybe candidates for TNC pickup, because when I'm there, it looks like the boba people are really there. That seems to be there a lot. That seems, so we see both of those as candidates, but I think we can kind of draw all that out for you on a map and maybe put in little drop notes about maybe we put, the monitoring sticks at this location and this location, and start toying with ideas and times. Maybe it gives you a clay model that you can then manipulate and find something that you're happy with. Did that answer?
I'd love to also see what the stop sticks, what, the metered parking, if there's, what that implementation would look like, how long it would take to get implemented,
Sure.
how that would coordinate with Commander Garcia and his team if need be, and just kind of the logistics of that, so we have a better idea of that.
Yeah, sure. I think the commander would be happy to come back and have a little talk on that next time.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, the rep has offered to come out and give you a presentation if you'd like. And if we want to line that up, we can also, so you can ask questions about the stop sticks.
that would be very helpful, I think. It's come up a couple times now, so
Okay.
yeah.
I
That'd be
will
great.
set that up.
And then someone else suggested lighted crosswalks, like the flashing. I don't know if they're in the road or wherever else, just to draw drivers' attention that this is a crosswalk, this is a pedestrian crosswalk. Can we maybe get a proposal on logistics of that, cost of that, something that we'd have to put in the budget, or if it's not as cost prohibitive, that it could be one of the add-ons in the department?
They are cost prohibitive. We got a grant and we did some at two locations. I think one was Visitation in Mariposa a long time ago, but the other one was at school at BES. And once they go out, they're very expensive to replace, and they didn't last that long. They were like, this was more than 10 years ago, and they were like $800 a unit for each light.
These were in pavement markers that
In-pavement
Karen's talking about. They
lights.
were in pavement initially. But now, if you look at this intersection that we're talking about, yeah, it is this intersection. We have marked bulb outs that are flattened. We have the pedestrian beacons. We have pretty much everything you could implement there. So I don't know that I'd put anything. And yeah, there's maybe one intersection higher up the street that I think we need to look at a little harder, the one right below Madhouse. I think we need to take a look at that. And we might have an idea that we could bring back for you on that spot. Yeah, Mendocino. Does anybody else need Dramamine? He's driving so fast. I'm like a little queasy here. Yeah, that one right there. We kind of, it's sort of a spot. It's a downhill spot that's kind of coming to a flat. Maybe people are picking up speed there, and maybe there's something else we can do with traffic calming there.
Because I live on Mendocino, and I can say that when I walk up that way, when I'm standing on the northeast side of Mendocino Visitation intersection, the cars can't see me that are coming down Visitation right by where Nana's used to be, and they they're gaining speed, so they're whizzing.
Right, because of that diagonal space, and
Right.
that's exactly what we were thinking about. How do we slow people there?
Right.
And
And then when you're looking the other way, if there's a car, you can see the bumper of the car. There's the light post that's there, and I think there's the water bill
Yep, right there, right behind
mailbox
that
and
car.
a tree
Yep.
and a couple of other things. So they can't see you as well coming up Visitation because of the things that are necessary. So is there a way to make outside of the flags?
We've got some ideas for you to chew on that we'll bring to your next meeting, I
Great.
promise.
Thank you.
So I guess in addition to what you mentioned, just in the effort to summarize what we've been talking, so no handicap or parking could be done here because of the slope.
So it could be done. Most likely, it could only be done on the downhill side, but understand that it would remove 3 parking spaces.
Okay, and the other point is that space in the teen center potentially be converted into a parking lot.
I think that is certainly part of the suite of solutions you all could recommend, yes. And the other point about the ADA spaces, and I'm not trying to badger this, because when we design, let me back up and gather my thoughts for just a moment. So the challenge with an ADA space is you want to make the access to the place you're getting to, you want to make the whole thing accessible, right? You don't want to say, well, look, I built an ADA space here on Visitation Avenue, but as soon as a wheelchair user gets out to Visitation Avenue, they're on a 15% downslope, and the businesses they're going to don't have ADA accessible stairs. That's not a good use. So when we built the library, we very intentionally built that space up on the downhill slope, and then we created an ADA accessible path across the existing sidewalk, incorporated in there, and then created that egress way into the library. And that was done to accommodate that one program, that one space, that activity, the new library. We did it very intentionally. As we're moving along, I was the project manager on that project, and the architect originally said, well, why don't we just put it on the side street? And I said, time out. We're not going to provide secondary access for handicapped people. We are not going to do that. But it cost a lot. It took up a lot, and it only serves one business. Even if a handicapped space gets there, if they get out and they choose to park there, even though it's in front of the library, they're not going to the library, they go somewhere else. The rest of Visitation is not compliant with the ADA. So, if you put it somewhere else, what purpose are you trying to accomplish? You're really not getting those people somewhere.
The other thing, Commander Garcia, could you also come back to us on what an increase in a fine for a double parking could be increased to for double parking on Visitation?
Absolutely.
Just what is our max? What is our,
Yes,
we
absolutely.
don't want to be ridiculous, but we do want to make it serious.
Yeah, we can definitely look at that.
And then I'm also thinking that maybe once we make a recommendation and maybe when the city council approves, perhaps even just giving Lucky's, Melissa's, Julie's, Midtown, just little postcards to give to all of those Uber Eats and DoorDash drivers, something to say, hey, we have loading spaces now. Please park here. Please don't double park. You know, they're going to get various drivers for, you know, it's never the same person, right? But if they could give it something to the driver to say, hey, we'd really appreciate, you know, being respectful of our town and our citizens that live here, kids that live here, could you park in the loading areas? If that gets approved and goes through, that'd be a way to just continue the outreach for addressing that potential double parking, you know, community.
Great idea. Great. If no other comments on the committee for this matter, I guess we'll move on to the next matter. So a lot of homework for you guys. Thank you for taking that on. And the next item then is item D, the Baylands draft EIR review and discussion. And so perhaps with this, maybe staff give us a quick overview of sort of what the expectation is of the committee here, sort of the, you know, where in the process we are, sort of top level. I see Emily has it printed out here. And so it'd be good to sort of know, you know, what the expectation is from the committee and the time frame too.
There was, well, I guess it wasn't the committee that requested, it was a community member, but had asked about the quarry draft EIR. And quite a long time ago, when there was an EIR for the Baylands to change the general plan, it started really that Open Space and Ecology Committee wanted to give input on that. And the city council directed and the city attorney wrote a staff report that the council approved, allowing them to, as a body, make comments on the draft EIR for the Baylands to modify the general plan. So with the request from the public, we didn't really poll the committee members, but there's a space for you as a body to comment on the specific plan, draft EIR for the Baylands, to say, this is what we think about the circulation, traffic, and transportation issues that have been studied, and these are our comments and feedback about it. You're not obligated to in any way. I feel like at Open Space and Ecology, we also have a couple new members, and here's all your homework. They're very enthusiastic. They want to review the whole thing. They split it up by chapters. This is a little bit different. There's a circulation chapter, and we are here to facilitate if you want to, as a body, offer comments. You can still offer comments as a resident, as a member of the community, but the feeling from the Open Space and Ecology Committee was that it carries more, it has more impact if you do it as a body. So what they do, they split up the chapters, they're all reviewing them, they're documenting their comments. We have a template for them to document their comments. We combine them, and at a committee meeting, we send them out with the agenda, everybody reviews them, and as a body, they say, yes, we agree, or we want to discuss this and change this comment. People may feel differently, and then we submit those on behalf of the committee. So that's where we are, and it's a lot of homework. I don't remember how long that chapter is, but we're open to facilitating that if you guys feel like you want to comment as a body on that document.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from the committee. Yeah.
Yeah, so in one of the chambers meeting, I was talking to the PR of the Baylands, and for some reason, you know, she offered to give a presentation, because where I told her, can you just tease out, you know, like traffic related items of this project, because it's huge and that will inform those. And, you know, if she was able, I mean, she offered to come to one of the meetings. So then I brought that to the committee here. And my thinking is, you know, we usually work on sticky issues, like right now with the Visitacion and so forth, the other, you know, safety, street-related concerns that citizens have. But in this case, we probably have the opportunity, you know, to sort of have an idea in paper before it's implemented, and maybe that we had raised some red flags and we have made some comments and just discussed them. So that was mainly my driver on this, because it's such a big project, and we have the you know, our working plan, and that involves bicycle lanes, the Bay Shore, et cetera, et cetera. So we're just trying to get an idea how this big project was going to fit in with all that. But if you're telling us that we have to go and research that data and bring that out, I think that's a different conversation, you know.
Because, so the city hired the consultant that prepared the draft environmental impact report for this Brisbane, for the Baylands development specific plan. They paid for it, but it's our consultant. So the staff, the administrative staff is saying it's not appropriate for them to represent the document to a city committee, because, and we discussed this at a previous meeting, that they would be trying to sell their project to us. So this is an active, you know, environmental impact report under review that needs to be certified ultimately, and then you're having the proponent convince you that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see the conflict of interest, but I see your point, and it's a valid point. So my question
And I think there was a further comment that if you have a public discussion of it, have it de facto having a hearing on it, which those need to happen at the planning commission too. That was a concern legally.
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, so you're saying that, like, we need to go into the project itself to find out if there's any conflict that we see with what's going on right now, rather than say, you know, this project might present X capacity of vehicles on this road right now. This is what we have a capacity, which is going to do this, or it might already, you know, sort of saturate some roads and speeding issues that we already have on this side. So that's mainly my concern about understanding, you know, the impact of the Baylands in the traffic to the safety streets.
Well, I mean, the comments can be the committee's understanding. So if you say, this looks like you haven't mitigated these traffic impacts, it's fair to make that comment. And, you know, I understand that you guys are not traffic engineers, so maybe there's a challenge with that. So I'd suggest that, you know, we just put this on the agenda, right, to have the discussion about what your role is going to be. Why don't we, before the next meeting, everybody looks through the documents, and then we can have a little bit more detailed discussion about whether you guys want to comment as a body, or if you see a couple of major, you know, I'm not saying that you should each give us 5 pages of comments. If you see a few major issues and you want to comment as a body, we want to facilitate that for you. And if you don't, I think that's fine too. And I've told the OSEC new members, you know, this is, you're asking to do this. We're not telling you that you have to do this.
I think we did request this on the work plan as well for the year. It's the third item behind sort of the visitation, traffic and safety. So, you know, it is something that we want to do, I think, as well. But I like the idea of maybe take some time to review and think it through. But go ahead.
I do want to have the committee make recommendations or comments. I saw it on the agenda on Friday and thought, crud, I've got a lot of pages I got to read too. So I've printed and started making questions and notes. So I'm hopeful that we can have a discussion, especially with, you know, Randy and Commander Garcia and you and Tomas present, because, you know, just thinking about, for example, kids getting across Bayshore Boulevard to go to the new middle school. You know, one of the points was that the Baylands provides crossing guards at Bayshore and Geneva and Bayshore and Main Street. Well, how long are they going to provide those, you know, for 100 years? Who's going to pay for their benefits? You know, are they going to be employees of the middle school, the school district, or are they going to be employees of Baylands? Does Baylands dissolve after it's finally been created? So, you know, is there a different way? Is it more costly to set up like a pedestrian bridge over Bayshore? Perhaps now it's more costly, but now do it instead of 20 years from now when they're like, we're not going to pay for your crossing guards anymore, right? So just things like that. I don't know when we can have that conversation or discussion, but I've got lots of questions.
It's a great example.
Yeah, that really is. May I ask, Vice Chair, how long did it take you to read the Transportation and Circulation chapter?
I didn't get through Appendix F1 yet. It's 756 pages, but but it wasn't just the transportation section. So like the 140 pages of the
Right,
transportation
right.
section, that I did this weekend.
Okay.
But I did the executive summary as well, the whole executive summary, not just the transportation section of it, but also, there's lots of other things I wanted. The Appendix F2, which is the safe routes to schools. That was easier because it was shorter.
Sure.
But it's very valuable. Like I also have questions of like the Bay Trails, like how are we going to create a barrier between 101 and the Bay Trail? Like, what's the
Right.
safety barrier of that? And what's the safety barrier for, the Cal trains going through so we don't have kids, jumping
Right,
in
at
front
grade
of trains?
crossings and doing stuff like that. So I think my question was helpful because I think you've really focused on the areas that I would suggest the rest of the committee consider doing, is that you go back and you read the executive summary first, and then you read the transportation section. And then I think that when we come back the next time, I'll let Karen and Tomas figure out if they want to try and get a sense of you individually, what sort of questions you have, so we can get an idea how much of the agenda it might take up. But then see what those kind of questions are. And if we get to the point where we need to invite the consultant that did the work on the city's behalf in or something to answer your questions. But I would take a lot of the comments you made and I would turn those around and turn those into recommendations. Like, for instance, saying, you've said the crossing guard, you'd say, the city we understand what that mitigation is, but the city needs to ensure that these crossing guards exist in perpetuity. Or the city should consider requiring the developer to do this. And those are the type of things, I think the mitigation, let's just say it as an example, that the mitigation may end up being found satisfactory at the end of the day. The council may want to certify that EIR, but all of those other considerations are things that'll go into development agreements and are good points for people to bring up now to make sure they're happy. Because you're exactly right. It's one thing to make a mitigation that says they're going to have crossing guards. It's another thing to implement it so that kids 50 years from now are still safe.
Right, because that is, Bayshore was designated as a youth high injury,
Network, HIA
roadway.
network, right.
And so just didn't make sense reading what I was reading. I'm like, if it really is what it's designated, we need to do better.
Yep, agreed.
So I guess can the committee take as an action item to read the executive summary at least, and then portions of the transportation as well as F1 and F2? Is that where we wanted to leave it? Is there anything else that you recommend, Emily, from your perusing at least? Because those are the ones I also had identified as sort of the key ones to take a look at. Paul?
Question for you, Randy. And I read through the transportation like what Emily was talking about as well. And figure 4.18-2 is pretty telling as far as how many trail connections there's going to be coming out of the Baylands and the Bay Trail as well. And one of the questions I had was when they talked about separation of the roadways for the bicycles. Is that painted separation or is that a physical barrier separation, Randy?
It varies in so many locations that I'd have to pull that specific example up and look.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay,
one of
and
them.
then something else that it mentioned regarding the trails, because it seems like a lot of the circulation going through the Baylands, especially through the open space and open area sections, is a trail corridor.
Mhm.
And they talk about setting the standards for the San Mateo County Trails Plan.
Right.
And it seems like that's something that's so detailed and so like a real quality plan that we've adopted that, or we're going to implement that.
So it would be a requirement, if the EIR states that is the mitigation, then that's a requirement of the project. So then when they bring forward plans to implement what's spoken about in there, they would be required to implement. That would be part of the mitigation monitoring and reporting plan.
And that's something that is a standard that's superior
I would say, yeah, sure, I'll use the word superior, why not? Let's say it's superior only because it is something that's being created by a staff, that's what they do full-time, and they have consultants working them full-time, they design trail plans. So, yeah, I would say it's certainly a best practice.
And it seems like that would be implementing things like traffic calming where they intersect in those trails and daylighting and other.
It would certainly, yes, it would be the best practices available at the time.
Okay.
Sure, absolutely.
that could be a comment that they use best practices and incorporate traffic calming at those crossings. And what I'm gathering from the first feedback is that I'm thinking that each of you might have a little bit different perspective, and together you're kind of going to cover a lot of the points that are in the document, because you're focused on trails, you focused on kids and families. Darius is a pedestrian that does a lot of walking.
I'm concerned the bridge is going to be the Tunnel Avenue overpass is going to be gone so soon, and there's no sort of fix for that connectivity for a while. So yeah, definitely.
There you go. And Christian, the business community, maybe has a certain perspective on the commercial areas. Together, I think you'd have a lot of good feedback as a group.
One of the things I also noticed in transportation was lighting, which was really important for the trails. So that was good that they're really focusing on keeping the trails well lit while still maintaining the night sky ordinance requirements.
So are we going to, next steps? Is it that we're going to come back next meeting and have a more in-depth discussion and ask our questions? Is that what I'm gathering?
Yes.
I should get through F1 by then.
So yeah, it's to the committee's pleasure. We can, what the Open Space and Ecology Committee is doing, well, we did for the quarry was everyone submitted their comments by a deadline, and then we circulated those to everybody, and we used a template. But we have a little bit longer because this is a 150-day period, although we're about a month in at this point. So I can send around that template, but I don't, if you guys want to take the time to discuss verbally versus documenting and then sending that around and then discussing verbally, that's fine. Kind of, maybe you should tell us what you prefer.
Perhaps you can send the template around first, but we can also discuss verbally at the next meeting and then have a meeting to sort of write out whatever thoughts in that template and send that back around.
But is that more helpful for you, all four of you, Tomas, Randy, Commander Garcia, to get mine aren't really comments per se, more like questions, just want to dig more, like, I love a good roundabout, but Americans do not like roundabouts, and there's a lot of roundabouts in this thing, so.
A lot of roundabouts, yeah, there are.
I love them, but I'm just like, oh, how's this going to go? So got a lot of questions, not necessarily comments. So is that useful for you to see all of those ahead of time?
To the extent that you can. I wouldn't want to, and Karen, jump in if you don't think I'm wrong. To the extent that you can put the comments that you've already got, that you've read through, I think it's really useful both for us, and I think it's useful for the chair as you're establishing the agenda, so you can see, all right, here's what I've got. I got 20 comments or questions or thoughts to go through. It's one thing. If I've got a couple hundred, then maybe Darius can have a different conversation with Karen, and we can talk about how you're going to package that and move it forward and still get your comments and questions submitted by the deadline. So if you can, that's great. And I don't, nobody's going to be given a low grade if you don't get it turned in by the time of the next meeting. I understand you all have lives and you're doing this as volunteers. So.
And to think about the schedule, the comments are due in the very beginning of September, and we meet at the beginning of the month. So I imagine, if possible, that we would be combining our comments in writing and reviewing them as a body at the August meeting. That's quite a bit earlier than the due date, but unless we set a special meeting, that's kind of when we're going to have to finish.
And being new to the committee, did we have a meeting every month of the summer? I mean, I'm okay with that. I just didn't know if there's I think the council took a month off last summer. Is that something that all the committees do, or is that?
The council's taking a break. We have, but it's kind of fit with schedules, availability, workload. It isn't a set time, so we don't have to take one off if it's going to work, that we can get a quorum every month. But you can discuss if you'd like. I'm open to hearing that.
So for practical matters, have you guys encountered any hairy situation after reviewing this, the traffic portion of this plan? And also, this is something that is going to be similar to the Ridge, where we're not going to be, because I'll be honest, I haven't read it now. I'm going to read it. That we're not impacted as much.
I can speak to the first part of your question, but I'm not sure I can answer the rest. I've been involved in every one of the sections that has an input on public works, because oftentimes the consultant that's working for the planning department, and the lead in that is the community development director, it's John Swicky, who's taken the lead on this with his consultant, Lloyd Zola. And then there are various sub-consultants that do it. So I've had regular meetings with them, and I know the commander was asking me, he said, have you read the whole thing? I said, no, but I read half of it twice, because I get a draft and I look at it, and we're trying to, and mostly what my review is intended to do is to ensure that it's consistent with our existing conditions and with our existing general plan requirements and such, and so that in our existing engineering procedures, and so that it's transitioned over. I think most of you will find things that you'll have, I wonder why they're doing that, or you will have things that you could have thought better. I think if you look through the transportation section, for the most part, you're gonna go, wow, there's some really innovative ideas going on. There's a lot of really great traffic calming ideas, in my opinion, going through some of the property on the east side where they're making slow pedestrian type streets, and there's some really, it's neat. Well, if you're an engineer, it's neat. I think it's pretty cool. But I think hopefully as the committee you'll look at it and see there's a lot of thought put into it, but it needs your eyes on it too, because you're going to come at it from a different perspective. So that's why the committee's there. Sir.
But yeah, I mean, one thinking from my end is now's the time if you want them to do something extra that's going to make things more safe or practical or pretty, whatever. You could push back, and the developer might even, do it.
And yes, and you're bringing in an interesting twist into this, another fold that goes into this, because there are two things that are going on eventually. The purpose of CEQA is to examine the potential impact of a project on the environment. And if you find impacts on the environment, to find appropriate mitigations for those. Okay, so that's one piece of a project. That's required. Once the governing body decides to certify that EIR, they have to have an MMRP, and you have to either mitigate each of those, or you have to make a ruling of overriding considerations and say, yes, we acknowledge the fact that this piece of this project is going to have an impact that we cannot mitigate. So that has to be done. That's by law. But the next piece you go into is really when you get into the development agreement, is when the city starts to negotiate terms with the developer. And that's usually for giving them a situation, you could say it better than me if I was sure, a estoppel. You're giving, the development agreement is giving the developer a estoppel. We're saying, okay, look, we're going to negotiate this with you now, and you understand that this is what the terms that will be imposed upon your project are going to be for the next 20 or 30 years. In exchange for that, you give us X, Y, and Z. And so that goes back and forth in that fashion. But that's usually not done as part of the CEQA document. In the CEQA document, you can't ask for more. We can ask for what we think is something that truly mitigates something as opposed to something else, but you can't extend it and go further than that.
Any other questions on this topic then, or is it straightforward in terms of what needs to happen before the next meeting, or is there still questions on that? Pretty clear? Cool. Yeah, so I'll review these portions and have more discussion, and then if any questions, I guess we can draft them and send ahead of time to, and if you could send the template out before, that would be helpful, just to kind of have that
Yeah,
as
I'll
a
do
framework
that right
as I
away,
go through
yeah.
it as well. Right. Alrighty. I guess that completes the new business. Are there any staff update or any public comment, I guess, on this topic?
There was another piece of new business on the agenda that was set out on Friday, but it's not there anymore. Are we just pushing that till next month? I can tell you what it is. It was electing the chair and the vice chair. Just curious if that's
Yeah, I
getting
think
pushed.
Tomas had shared the draft agenda instead of the latest.
It was in the email version because I had open here.
So is that on our agenda right now, Chair? Or what are we,
Well, let's see. Yeah.
election of chair or vice chair? There we go. Okay, it is. All right, so you've got it then. And maybe before we move along, I thought that at one point in time we were going to at least read into the record which individual provided comments to the committee on Visitacion Avenue. And if there's a brief subject line text of it, I think we probably ought to just we don't need to read the entire document. We should just indicate we get an email from this person, generally talking about this on this and this date, so it's in the minutes.
Yes, can we do that, please? Do you have that email available, Tomas? Thank you.
So we're doing the election of the chair and vice chair?
What's that?
Are we doing the election?
We're going to
of-
read this first.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a public comment from Zach Orber, who requested additional stop signs, I believe. Is this the, or this is public comment? Yes, they submitted public comment that they have concerns around the lack of stop signs and the lack of pedestrian safety on the way to walking around town. I believe that their request is specifically for additional stop signs. They submitted quite a long message around some of the safety issues, but I believe they were requesting additional stop signs and for evaluation of that as well.
Right, and the matter, that correspondence was provided to the full committee, so you had it as part of your considerations, and I'm sure you took it into mind as we were having that earlier discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll continue to evaluate. This is a part of tools of that we can use moving forward. Yeah. Thank you, Randy. All right. Yeah. Alrighty, on to the next item of new business, which is election of chair and vice chair. So staff, could you walk us through the process of how this works then? Because I think we are a little delayed on this process from last year.
Right, we elected in March of last year, so here we are in May. We've used different processes, but when there isn't conflict, any member can nominate a slate, and you can vote for the slate, chair and vice chair together, or chair first and then vice chair. I know we don't have two members present, but you can choose to continue this, or if you feel like you have a slate tonight, we can proceed. So, yeah, you should ask your other members.
Yes. Can I open up to the committee for comments?
So usually, in the past, we had chairs that had wanted to keep serving, and that's, fine. Or, we want to give the new members an opportunity to either be chair or vice chair. So,
Yeah. I prefer the latter option, I believe. That's kind of, I think I like that. So I would propose, if possible, I would nominate Emily to be the chair then. And then for vice chair, Paul, would you accept the nomination for vice chair?
Yes.
I guess, Christian, do I have a second on that nomination then? As a slate then to elect Emily as our chair and Paul as our vice chair?
do you accept being chair?
Yeah, would you accept that?
I guess.
Yeah, I second that nomination.
Great. Are there any other, nominees on the table? Great. In that case, we just go ahead and vote for that then. All in favor of the slate where Emily would be chair and Paul vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Great. Well, congratulations then. And with that, we'll hand over the baton.
And thank you for your chairmanship.
Thank you. Yeah.
Darius.
Yeah, wonderful. Cool. And I guess, do I finish out this meeting still and then hand over to the next meeting?
Yeah.
Great, all right. With that, then we'll move over to staff updates.
Yeah, so on Visitation Avenue, you guys might have seen the red pavement markers. These are to reflect AB 413 striping changes, just to make it even more clear, because we've noticed that it's maybe not clear throughout the whole community just by changing the striping to say, hey, you can't park here. So we're also adding these red pavement markers instead of red paint, which would require ongoing maintenance. And the city manager expressed a desire to expand this throughout the rest of the areas we made striping changes. So it's going to be, right now it's only on Visitation and the off streets of Visitation, but it's going to be expanding to all 40 locations where you guys actually helped us collect that data and started this whole project. I think it must have been a year ago now. So yeah, that'll be in the works. And there'll be plenty of outreach about it. Caroline's really good about that, so we'll get the word out about that. Regarding the shuttle stop improvement project, that started on Tuesday. They've done their excavating work for the concrete pads. It just started this week on Tuesday, so not much to report there. Alvarado to San Benito walkway, we had our pre-construction meeting with the contractor, so we're kind of in that beginning period before construction where we're waiting for their submittals, their schedules, any other kinks we need to work out. And again, outreach for all these projects because there's traffic control plans and traffic considerations for pedestrians and vehicles. Well, yeah, obviously, right. Well, And I mean, and obviously it goes without saying that the walkway would be closed during construction, but, and then, that is, and oh, this is for Paul, regarding the, on Monarch and North the pedestrian signs that you requested, we got the okay from Randy, and should be a matter of weeks. I'll probably circle back with Keegan on that, but so we're gonna go through with that.
Thank you.
That's all I got.
Great. On to chair and committee matter members. I guess I had a question whether, have there been many violations or citations for the AB 413 so far, or is has that been, that is being enforced already, I guess? Is that correct, or?
At this point, we are still educating and giving warnings for it, but so far we have not really seen a lot of complaints for it yet. We've seen complaints.
Great, thanks, just curious. I mean, I've seen not many cars in those places anyway, so I was just kind of curious.
I think Councilmember Raymond Lou sent over an email with the request to add a matter regarding that accident that happened at Visitation and like 5 points, right?
Post office.
Yeah, post office. Into the post office, maybe.
Yes, thank you for the reminder, yeah.
So I can give an update on that, but it's got to be limited. That was an accident that occurred due to a medical incident. So without violating HIPAA rights, we can leave it at that. But it was a anomaly accident, and it was definitely a medical issue.
Thank you. Yeah, that addresses the email, yeah. Cool, thank you.
And one more update, quick one. Regarding SB1 funds, I think we've mentioned this before in meetings past, how annually we get a certain amount of funds from the state to report on our next fiscal year's pavement maintenance project. So for the fiscal year for 2025, 2026, we're going to be doing an overlay on Klamath Avenue between San Bruno and Visitacion. The reason we're doing Klamath is because the pavement condition index, which is a score from 0 to 100, is currently at 46, so it's an F. So we're going to overlay that street. And also I think it connects really well with other projects we've done in the past because we just did Visitation overlay, we slurry sealed Klamath, and we're going to do Monterey between Visitation and San Bruno. So we're kind of tackling this central part of town where we have some of our lowest pavement condition ratings. I think Monterey is even worse, like at 30 or 35 or 40. So that's going to be our next project for 2025, 2026. There are a couple of projects ahead of that, the 2024 slurry seal of Old County that we've talked about, and then the Monterey overlay, like I just said. But once we get those done, the next one is Klamath. So just wanted to let you guys know.
Will the Klamath overlay take into consideration the speed humps that are on that? Will it affect those?
That is a great point, I think, because we'll definitely take that into consideration. I think it's because it's third in line. I haven't quite got to that, but thank you for pointing that out.
Anything else for committee matter?
Yeah, I'm curious about the Safe Streets designations for the sidewalks. And I know that parking on the sidewalks is like it happens all over town. We have to park on the sidewalks, but completely blocking the sidewalks and on Visitation, I'm wondering if that's something that we're concerned with regarding a vehicle that blocks the sidewalks completely to where you have to walk out into the street and around the cars.
So I assume you're talking about Visitation right before it joins with San Benito. It's past Madhouse where this happens.
Yeah, yeah.
There are vehicles that violate that requirement on the regular, and they are regularly called in, and the vehicles are either moved or cited.
Correct. We do. We do cite those vehicles as we get them called in.
Okay, I was just curious about the, there's quite a few of the houses right there above Madhouse that do that. And I thought that distinction of the safe streets with the little stars on the sidewalks were like high priority.
There was a concentrated enforcement on the safe pedestrian routes with the wayfinding markers, but those streets aren't part of that area.
Yeah, they are. They have the emblems in the sidewalk. Visitation between Alvarado and Klamath.
Is there a rolled curb there?
There's
Oh, right.
planted
Alvarado.
strips there.
Actually, yes, you're right, probably one side of that has the markers.
Yes.
One side, yeah.
So I guess the comment is if we see something, let's say something. So if we see vehicles that are parked illegally and they're on that, it's perfectly fine. We have a police department for it. They're happy to come out and do that.
And we can reiterate directed patrol there as well.
Any updates how the pilot study is coming along with the parking permits?
Yeah, we sent out our mailer last Wednesday to get feedback. You know, pretty broad questions being like, do you feel parking has improved? Would you like to continue the program? Any other additional comments? Just those kind of questions. So we sent that out last week, and we asked for the due date to be next Wednesday. So we give them 2 weeks to respond. So we'll have our feedback very soon. We also offered them a Google survey, which I haven't looked at yet, but I can get back to you guys on how many people have responded to that. Haven't received any letters yet, but yeah, we'll know by next meeting what people think, and I guess we'll go from there whether or not we continue, and we'll know more later.
Have you been citing? Have they called you to cite some of those illegal parkings there without the permit?
Actually, since the program began, it was because the direction was a complaint basis, 0 complaints. So no citations at this point.
If you were to ask me, I'm suspicious that people see the signs, the brand new shiny signs that say no parking without a permit, and that's enough to deter people from parking there. But we're waiting for the feedback to see if that's true. And at some point, the signs will be faded and it may not be as effective. But so far, it seems like neighbors haven't wanted to call in if anyone is not displaying their hang tag. I'm not there between 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. to know if everyone's displaying their hang tag, but we're hoping to get good feedback from the neighbors.
All right, great. If there's nothing else, then that'll be it for this meeting. The next meeting is June 4th, and we have quite a bit of homework to do before then. So with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.